Well, thank you, Mark, for the generous introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be talking about a few things this afternoon, but first I want to say, definitely thank you to Mel and Garish, is it? Yep, exactly. Big fans of both of their work, and I think it's very complementary to what we at Blue River are doing. There's a lot of interesting things going on autonomous vehicles. That's not something we're focused on, and I'll share a little bit about what that is today. In fact, I want to cover three things. The first is why we're interested in applying artificial intelligence to agriculture in the first place, the trajectory of precision agriculture, and specifically how we think management on the farm will move from thinking about an entire field as a management zone to 10 meter by 10 meter square as management zones to all the way down to individual plants. We think an individual plant is the appropriate way to think about management and investment on the farm. Second thing, talk about the technology, artificial intelligence in particular, that makes the idea of managing every plant even possible. And then third, I'll share a bit about Blue River Technology, the company that I'm with, and the progress and work we're making to deliver products into the field, into farmers' hands to help them manage every plant. So first, a bit about that opportunity and the trajectory of thinking about management and investment on the farm. So agriculture has been a story of technology eras. 100 years ago, there was the mechanical era where tractors and combines first came about. And the idea to the farmer was spend a lot more on equipment. You could farm a lot more acres, and you'll see that money back many times over. Then we had the chemical era, same idea. Spend more money, this time on fertilizers and pesticides. And you can get that money back in the form of better yields, higher yields. 20 years ago, it was the biochemical era, where this time it was spending more money on seeds that were genetically modified to resist insects and herbicides. And now we're into the digital era. And the exciting thing about the digital era is it's no longer about more, it's about management and investment decisions, using all of those inputs that came before in a smarter way, in a more customized way. And this is moving from 10 meter by 10 meter zones. So if we were to manage the entire field, which has been best practice for a very long time, that's millions of plants we're talking about. The same variety, the same fertilization scheme, the same crop protection plan. Precision agriculture has delivered an ability to shrink that down to about 1,000 plants, or 10 meter by 10 meter square, and a grid similar to this one here. And that's a big improvement because, as you all know, fields vary quite a bit. Plants are very different. And so thinking about whether it's variety of crop or fertilization scheme, crop protection scheme, at a slightly smaller zone can bring a lot of return, a lot more profit to the farmer if done correctly with the right tools. And we see an opportunity to take that the next step. Rather than managing millions of plants or even 1,000 plants, we see an ability to bring tools to the farm to help the farmer manage every plant. If this corn plant is worth a few pennies, we see a world in which there are tools that help the farmer think about the investment that's made into that plant based on the return that the farmer thinks he can get. In other words, each individual plant is the appropriate management zone to think about. And the reason we're excited about that is we think there's still a lot of economic headroom on the farm for the farmer to go capture. This is a chart many of you have probably seen, over those eras of machinery and chemistry and biochemical, we've seen yields on the farm go up and up and up. And I think this slide is even a little outdated. The current best yield is not 180, the average that we're seeing in the US, but 500 bushels per acre. And the way those farmers are achieving those 500 bushels per acre is by walking that field every week, sometimes even every day, understanding the needs of the plants and looking at what everything needs and essentially spoon-feeding based on that information. And the opportunity that we see is mimicking that, mimicking the way that those farmers are achieving those great yields by having machines that can do what the farmer's doing. See every plant, understand its needs, and deliver those solutions, that management right then and there. And this makes it tangible. Everyone's seen a cornfield like this where the plants have high variation in size. Sometimes it's difficult to say how this happened, whether it was planting or fertilization or pests or what have you, but this is a problem. A farmer would not necessarily want to invest similarly across each one of these plants, but today there's not the tools to do it, and we end up with a result like this. Everybody wants the big ears, ideally, But if we knew that this plant was only ever going to deliver a small year, why wouldn't we invest in that plant differently? Why wouldn't we think about fertilization or crop protection a little bit differently? Because we know we're not going to get the return. Or who knows, maybe we'll find something that we can put on that small plant and help it catch up, whether that's a biological or some of the new inputs that a lot of exciting people are thinking about. But this is the opportunity that we see. And of course, to be able to address each individual plant, to address that variability, we're going to need machines that are a lot smarter than what we have. Because unfortunately today, we have equipment that's incredible for covering a lot of acres and maximizing the efficiency in the acres under production for each farm. But you know, and this is a handout that I took from a company a couple years ago at a trade show, the best that we can do today is treat every plant the same. And that's not going to be good enough here. We need those machines to be seeing each plant and using that information to make smart decisions. So we need to teach these machines to be smarter. We need to make them smarter. And as you heard about, if you were here for the last couple speeches, there's this emerging field called machine learning, where we can actually teach computers how to think. And really, we've been teaching computers how to think ever since the very beginning. In the early days, it was very prescriptive. 2 + 2 = 4. We explicitly told the computers all of the rules and the answer, such that when it saw a familiar situation, it would know exactly how to respond. Now, with the advent of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can go beyond that to much more complex situations. We can show a computer an email that it's never seen before and ask it whether it's spam or not. We can show it a photograph, and it can tell us whether there are people in it and potentially even who the people are. These are problems where we didn't tell the computer exactly what to do when it saw that photo because it's never seen the photo before. But through teaching it with many, many examples, we can actually get good results out of the computers, make them a lot more smart. And just to illustrate this a little bit more, some researchers like to use games as they experiment and see what the possibilities of machine learning and artificial intelligence can do. So here are a few examples. Tic-tac-toe is a very simple game. In fact, probably the last time I played it was with some friends' kids. It's a very simple game, only a couple 100,000 possibilities that this game could do. And so you can actually teach a computer all 200,000 ways that the tic-tac-toe game could go, and it would be perfect at tic-tac-toe. So move on to the next challenge. Checkers, slightly more complex. Many millions of possible ways that a checkers game could go. And some researchers decided to have a computer run for 18 years. And at the end of those 18 years, it had gone through every possible way that the checkers game could go, such that when it saw it, it knew exactly how to win. And that computer at that point had solved checkers. It was the world's best checkers player. You could never beat it unless you played a perfect game. And then researchers moved on to chess. Chess is even many orders of magnitude more difficult than checkers. It's such that you couldn't ever train a computer with all of the possible ways that a chess game could go. And so we needed to think about a different way to make a computer, to teach a computer to be good at chess. And many of you probably know IBM figured this out 10 or 15 years ago, where they taught a computer with a machine learning algorithm tens of thousands of games of chess, such that the computer started to learn, based on the board situation, based on what was happening in the game, how best to make that next move. And it started to be able to get close to beating some world masters. Not perfect, still, it doesn't have the same understanding of the game that it had in tic-tac-toe or checkers, but still good enough to beat the best people. And then a couple years ago, there was even a more exciting result. And this is now a Chinese game called Go. I'm completely unfamiliar with it. I've never played it in my life. But from what people tell me, it's many more times complex than chess. So many possibilities that the best people in the world at this game called Go are described as having this sixth sense about the board. They can look at it and just use their intuition to know where the right move is. Now, this is the definition of a complex situation where even the best people in the world couldn't train a computer exactly how to act in every situation. But Google developed a deep learning algorithm where they could train a computer with tens of thousands of examples of situations in the game of Go, and it beat the best people in the world at this game. And so all of a sudden we have this result where computers are starting to be able to have successful and interesting and useful results in situations that are very complicated. Now, board games are nice for researchers. We care much more about this situation. A field of soybeans, for example, is the definition of a complex and highly variable environment. There are millions of plants, both crops and weeds, millions of situations that we need to train a machine to be able to understand. And so if we were to start with this problem, we'd probably want the machine first to be able to see all the plants, to know that some are soybeans and one is a pigweed. We'd maybe then want that machine to place herbicide on the pigweed to get rid of it, and maybe apply fungicide or fertilizer or insecticide on those soybean plants that needed it. That would be the challenge across the millions of plants in a soybean field. And with some of the technology that is able to play chess and play the game Go, we can start to do that. And we think this is possible throughout the crop production cycle. So take corn again, for example. Every place that a farmer would want to optimize some situation is in the cab, setting up their equipment, adjusting it. Artificial intelligence can be used to augment and reduce the resolution of their decisions all the way down to each plant. So from a tillage operation, what's the depth or the pressure that we're using? From a planting perspective, how do we make sure that the row is clear and that we're getting great seed-soil contact? From a nourishment perspective, can we see each plant after it's emerged and understand what its nourishment needs are from fertilizer, water in some cases? Protection, of course, this is very important. Understanding the weeds, the insects, the disease, and very surgically and precisely attacking each one of those. Harvest, of course, is very straightforward, except for there are 12 or 15 settings on most modern combines that could be adjusted real time based on the situation. And most importantly for us is a verify and learn step, is closing this loop, understanding the impact of every individual management decision and how it impacted the farmer's profit. And if it had a great impact, we want to remember that and do it again next year. And if it didn't have the desired impact, well, we're going to forget it and make sure to never do it again. And this is the way we can avoid little ears, potentially, from the start and make every ear as big as possible. So when we as Blue River, a young company, were looking at this problem, seeing this great opportunity, of course we were very excited, but we can't tackle all of it. And so we needed to pick a place to start. One project, one place that would really help farmers. And when we were talking with a lot of the farmers that we work with, crop protection and weed control specifically came up over and over and over again. Farmers described to us a need for new tools, new herbicides, just a new way to think about weed control because a lot of what they were doing wasn't working. And so that's where we decided to start. And of course, this is the current tools that farmers have. This is the opposite of thinking about managing every plant. This is spraying the entire field uniformly, putting herbicide on the ground, on the soil, putting herbicide on the crops, and occasionally, potentially even rarely, putting that herbicide where you really want it on the weeds. That's a big problem. That's a big potential to change. And of course, using a tool like that in a very broadcast manner, using the same herbicides over and over and over again, you end up with this. This is, we hear a lot about this particular weed and water hemp from farmers we talk with. This is I think a quote from Bayer's website. This weed is resistant to 5 of the most common herbicides that growers in the Midwest use. And that's a big problem for them. It's a big headache. They need a tool to think about it in a different way. And this isn't just an isolated problem. Every state in the U.S. that has major agriculture production has weeds that are resistant to glyphosate, dicamba, or 2,4-D, some of the more widely used herbicides today, especially in row crop production. So into this situation, 5 years ago, Blue River was founded, seeing an opportunity to take some of these technologies, computers, cameras, artificial intelligence, to enable ag machines to see every plant in the field and manage every plant, and give farmers all of a sudden the ability to think about profit and return on investment down to each individual plant. Over the last 5 years, we've gone from 4 people to now we're over 60. We're really proud of the team we put together to help deliver these products into the marketplace. A lot of diversity in folks that we have in the company. Everyone from people who used to work in agricultural research to farm operations, robotics, self-driving cars, Google and Mercedes, artificial intelligence and computer vision in a variety of places. It's really bringing together a lot of disparate talents, all focused on bringing together a solution, smarter machines in ag. And when we put this team together and started to think about What does a smart machine in ag consist of? What does it need to do? Well, we of course started again on the farm with the tools that they already had in their shed. Every farmer has a piece of machinery that can do these steps: prepare the soil, plant, fertilize, protect, and harvest. And we needed to understand exactly what each of those machines was doing, and more specifically, how the farmer was adjusting them and using them. And what we noticed is that every machine in the shed, before taking it out and doing an operation, a farmer would adjust it. They would sense the situation and sense how the field was doing, and they would decide how to deploy the tillage equipment, or how to set up the planter from a downforce perspective, or how to adjust the settings in that combine. And so if we think about a smart machine that's going to augment that farmer, we need to do at least a good job of sensing and deciding how to use that equipment, or even better. Then after that action, we noticed that as farmers were going through the field and using all this equipment, they'd often be turning around or looking out to the side and checking that all the nozzles on the boom were on, or looking behind them and making sure the tillage equipment was leaving the right thing, or looking behind at the planter and making sure that trench was closed appropriately. So the verify step is critical on the farm to make sure that the machines are doing exactly what they need to do on every single plant. And then there's a learning step, closing the whole loop. This is the idea I talked about before. Every time we interact with a plant, we want to learn the outcome of that action, whether it was a good outcome or a bad outcome, and use those lessons next year so that we can do even better. And so with this idea, we put together technology capabilities to be able to implement smart machines. That first row on the screen is what I would call the headline-grabbing, sexy technologies: computer vision, deep learning, robotics. Those are important, but just as important is that next row below it. These are the enabling technologies that allow all of those things to happen. An infrastructure to allow managing the massive amounts of data that deep learning needs. Optimization: these machines are thousands of little optimization problems where we need to find something that doesn't work and fix it very quickly and move on to the next one. Onboard processing is critical. These machines are out there in the middle of a field. They encounter a plant. They need to decide within milliseconds what the situation is and decide how to act and execute on that. And finally, we need to be able to track every plant in the field over time, whether that's a crop plant or a weed, and this is what we call a spatio-temporal database. This is simply just a picture, an idea of each plant in the field tracked over time, such that we can understand those management decisions that we're making and eventually the outcome. And once we put this together, we look for a place to go test it, a place to start. And lettuce in California was the perfect place for us to go. It, first of all, is a short drive from our office, which made it very easy for us in the early days. And more importantly, lettuce is a crop that's planted every day of the year. So unlike soybeans or corn, we could go out and test our machine in a production environment whenever we wanted. And we spent the first few years perfecting this equipment, going through 5 or 6 generations of it to get it just where we wanted. And this here is actually a thinning operation. We're removing the unwanted lettuce plants for the farmer. This machine is making 5,000 decisions per minute, each with about a 1/4 inch accuracy. So each one of those sprays there is an individual decision on plants to remove. And it's placed with about a 1/4 inch accuracy relative to where we want it. And we built this into a commercial service. We've covered tens of thousands of acres in a production environment, and we operate at about 10% of lettuce in the US today. So next time you eat a salad, there's about a 1 in 10 chance that artificial intelligence and a robot from Blue River helped care for it and helped get it to your plate. About a year ago, we decided that we had learned enough in lettuce and we were ready for the next challenge. And we went out and talked again with all of our farmer partners. And weed control in cotton kept coming up as one of the biggest problems. Weed control in row crops generally was one of the biggest problems. And so we embarked on an effort to learn row crops and learn cotton in particular. So 9 months ago, we went to Australia and we saw our first cotton. And at first, the machine had absolutely no idea what it was. It was a plant, but couldn't tell, lettuce or what have you. And we trained our learning algorithm with tens of thousands of images, and pretty soon we got some pretty interesting results. The image on the left there, our agronomist drew boxes around all the plants that he saw in the image, and said what was a weed and what was a cotton. And we fed that same image to our learning algorithm, And it actually saw some things that he didn't. It had all of a sudden, after just a few short months, gotten better than even our in-house agronomists at identifying what's happening in that picture. And this isn't limited to just cotton. This is a collection of some of the crops that we've begun to train and collect images in and perfect an ability to detect the crop. And so lettuce, peppers, soybeans, cotton, corn, chickpeas, there's a number of others as well where we've taken tens of thousands of images, trained our algorithms exactly what to look for, and they're having some pretty exciting results in distinguishing, say, corn plants from weeds. And we deploy all this technology in what we call a see and spray machine. This is a machine, it's a tow-behind sprayer, hooks up to any tractor with a 3-point hitch and a couple hydraulic hoses, and you throw a screen in the cab. It's about the same width as a tow-behind hooded sprayer, 30 or 60 feet wide, depending on the farmer's situation, and can go up to 8 miles an hour. So pretty similar in that aspect to all other hooded sprayers. The intelligence is really what's under that hood. Each row has the computers and cameras necessary to see all the plants in the field. In this case, know whether they're cotton or weed, and precisely apply herbicide just to the weeds. And this is what it looks like under the hood. This is what the machine is seeing. So on the left there, you're seeing just the bare field with the cotton plants. There's a bit of a line. I'm not sure how hard it is to see on the screen, but there's a line there on the left of cotton plants and some weeds off to the left. And in that middle image, a couple milliseconds later, after the image has been captured, the machine is using that learning algorithm to know exactly what's a weed and exactly what's a crop. And then a few milliseconds after that, it has a bank of sprayers where it's turning on each one individually over each weed, such that it's painting each weed perfectly with herbicide. And this is where you can start to see the benefit of this. Rather than spraying that whole section on the right with herbicide, you're only putting the herbicide where you need it. And this is just an example of the possibility of identifying all the plants in the field and thinking about management decisions on each and every one. This is a video of, from the perspective of a weed, so to speak, of our machine out in Texas, actually this month. So you can see here in the slow motion version, as the machine comes over, you can see that camera row unit take a picture, and then as the nozzles come over, they're turning on just for a moment, coating that weed with herbicide. Well, in this case, it's actually just blue dye and water, and actually coating the camera and the weed next to it as well. And so a couple things to note here. One, this is happening very quickly. It's just turning nozzles on here and there. In addition, I want to talk a brief bit about our spray system. The standard spray system in agriculture is to uniformly apply a mist to the entire field. We specifically don't want to do that at all. We want to get really good coverage on that weed such that the herbicide can take effect, but we very specifically don't want to deposit any of that material anywhere else. And so we need to rethink the entire spray system from the tanks and the pumps and the way we mix herbicide and the way we deliver it to the nozzles and the way we actuate them on and off. We've had to rethink every step of that and come up with some proprietary, some kind of custom solutions in there just to make sure that we're getting the result that we want. It's a different way to think about spraying. It's a different way to think about application in ag. And we've been pretty proud of the progress we've made in, as you see in the video, being able to coat a weed with herbicide and 2 inches away have no deposition of that herbicide.
If you're capturing data where your application would be, you can theoretically map the nozzle tips were on that stuff.
That's right, yep. So one of the things, it's a great question, and for those folks who didn't hear, was whether we have an as-applied map of where the nozzles were on what part of the field we sprayed. So absolutely, because we're identifying all the plants, all the crops, all the weeds, and where we spray, we have a map of all of those. So you can see your stands and the uniformity of it and how many plants are out there. You can see the weeds and the weed pressure and how that varied across the field. And then you can also see where you sprayed. And so that's actually a great point where you can keep track of weed pressure throughout your field year after year and think about rotating herbicides on different types of weeds. That knowledge can be used in a number of different ways to manage a little better.
Extrapolate that out to use different product in different parts of the field.
That's right.
Like
Yep.
inkjet.
That's right. This is the world's biggest inkjet printer. And we definitely are taking a crawl, walk, run approach to this where on day one it's just one cocktail in a tank. We see a very clear path to having, just like in your color printer, multiple chemistries that are on board being applied as needed. A grass herbicide just on the grass, a broadleaf just on the broadleaf, cocktail for weeds that have developed resistance. Yeah, great question, thank you. So once we spray, we're not done. If you remember, there's a verify and learn step that we find to be critical in all of this. And understanding the efficacy of these applications, the results of these decisions that the machine is making is critical to us. And so this is we use some remote sensing to be able to come back into the field after a week later, after the herbicide has taken its effect, and understand whether it's worked or not. And so you can see in this image, this is a 3D sensor that we have on a drone, and you can see a weed patch just above the tractor in this image, and we would understand the composition of the weeds and the location in the field before the application, and then we can come back and verify that they've been removed, and if not, adjust and incorporate that learnings going forward. And from an herbicide perspective, bringing new modes of action is critical to fight weed resistance. So here's just some experiments we've done in Arkansas with pigweed. This is Liberty before the application and 12 days later. Effective on some small weeds, not as effective on larger weeds. Same story with dicamba. It knocks those weeds down, but definitely doesn't kill them, and probably many of them that are on the larger side will still reproduce. We can bring some non-selective chemistry into the mix as well. Because we're applying herbicide just to the weeds and not to the crop, we can open up what's available to the farmer. And so a traditional burn down recipe like paraquat and caparol could all of a sudden be applied in season directly on the weeds. And you can see that here on this, in that same trial, paraquat and caparol did a fantastic job controlling the weeds. So we developed this equipment and we took it out and wanted to show it to as many customers as we could this year. Bring it to as many farms, get a lot of feedback, continuing to make it better. And I like this picture. This is Eric Ian, our product manager, there pointing at the ground, and directly above his head you can see one of those row units. It's a little bit with the hood removed. And so that little white box and the sprayers beneath it, each one of those is modular. It's just like a planter. So each row unit has all of the intelligence, the computers and cameras and sprayers needed to manage each row width. And in this case, it's cotton set up at 40 inches, but could just as easily be modified to corn and beans at 30s or what have you. And so you just line up each one of those row units across the toolbar to match the configuration, and you can quickly jump between different kinds of fields. And the farmers that we showed it to, I think this is in Texas, weren't shy about getting down on their hands and knees and inspecting exactly what we were doing and giving us good feedback. And I wanted to, let me see if this will work. I wanted to share that experience with you all as well. A lot of the growers that we were talking to really enjoyed walking behind the machine. And a couple things to note here. You actually don't see much happening here, primarily because there's no weeds. If the machine isn't seeing weeds, it's not doing anything. It's not pouring money on the ground where it's not needed. It's waiting until it hits a patch of weeds, and then it turns on. It turns on each nozzle over each weed and delivers the appropriate dose to get good control. And so in situations like this, when we did some studies where we took our machine and were applying common selective herbicides just like the farmer would be using in their broadcast sprayer and compared them, our machine was using about 5 or 6% of the amount of herbicide that a broadcast application would do, and getting the same or better results. And it's doing that simply just by identifying each weed and applying herbicide only to each weed. I should note that this video is at 2 miles an hour. I tried running behind the machine at 6 miles an hour, and the video is terrible. So 2 miles an hour is about as fast as I can walk and keep it smooth.
Farmer friend of mine wants to know if you're going to have lasers that take care of the herbicide resistance. Yeah.
You know, the founders, and Jorge is here in the audience today. You can talk to him afterwards if you like. He experimented a bit with lasers, and a few calculations later determined that a refrigerator-sized laser was needed to kill weeds while the machine is going at speed. And we decided that not only was that impractical, but it was very dangerous to the people operating it. So.
22 would be too much lead to shoot with.
That's right.
But there's probably a way you can do it.
I think that's right. We're starting specifically with spraying herbicide, but there's no reason this see and spray machine couldn't be a see and shoot, a see and chop, a see and whatever you can imagine. And the feedback we were getting from growers, summarized here, these are some of the most common things we're doing. Of course, there's an exciting possibility to save a lot of herbicide, 90% or more, as I discussed. That bottom point around introducing new herbicide modes of action to fight herbicide-resistant weeds is also something that growers are pretty excited about. And something that we started to hear that surprised us a little bit was an interest to rethink about the seed that farmers were purchasing and putting on their field. If we're no longer putting herbicide on the crop, we can start to determine whether we need that herbicide-tolerant trait in the seed or not. That might be money that we could put in our pocket and spend in some other place. So there's a bunch of interesting things and feedback that we're hearing from growers, and we're continuing to learn about how this tool could be applied.
How about an economic question?
Sure.
How tough the weeds are in that part of the world where you were spraying. When you did the paraquat capital tank mix, were the farmers willing to take the hit in row with that product and maybe take out a crop plant by accident just to get rid of the bad weed like Alzheimer's?
It's a great question, and it's actually a dial on the machine, so each farmer can choose, because we saw a big spectrum depending on the situation, and farmers have an opinion on whether they want to kill some crops or not. It also depends. Cotton is a pretty resilient plant. It'll fill in and compensate. Soybeans too. Corn obviously less so. And so this is one of those important things that the farmer often knows best and how they want to manage their field. And so in that situation, we can give them the ability to choose how to handle it. So where do we go from here? We've started in lettuce, proof of concept. We proved that this can work. We just demonstrated this equipment in cotton this year and pretty happy with the results. We'll be commercializing it in the U.S. Cotton Belt for weed control on a limited basis next year in 2018. And then after that, we'll quickly roll it out to the rest of row crops. Soybeans, peanuts, corn, and others are on our radar, and we're trying to understand from our farmer customers how to prioritize those crops in those geographies to bring this tool to the right place where it's needed. And we're not going to stop there. As we talked about, we see this as the ultimate spray tool that can sit in a farmer's shed. A farmer can think about not just applying herbicide, but really anything that they would want to spray on their farm. And having it apply fungicide only to the diseased plants, or fertilizer only to those plants that need it. That's the vision for See and Spray, is to have it be a very flexible tool in the farmer's barn. And finally here, just to close, let's see if I can get the volume to work. There's a video that, if I can get to the audio to work, our marketing people love it. We saw an opportunity to take cameras, computers, and artificial intelligence to allow ag machines to see every plant in a field. We thought that we could give farmers the ultimate flexible tool to treat their field and manage their field in whatever way they wanted by having the knowledge of every plant and its situation, and an ability to spray very precisely, whether it be herbicide only to the weeds or fertilizer or fungicide directly on each plant that needed it.
Each field they go to has a different set of conditions, and they need to be able to adjust and correctly set that machine's performance for the field. One knob could be the protection of the cotton plant and how big of a buffer, a safe zone that we provide the plant, so that when we apply selective materials or non-selective materials, that we have the appropriate buffer. Another dial is how aggressive do you want to be at going after anything that looks like a weed. There's also some opportunities to inform the grower of how many weeds the system's seeing, even what kinds of weeds exist in the field, that they can start to tailor their herbicide programs towards those weeds.
The cameras and computers on the See and Spray machine are using deep learning algorithms that are similar to what's used in facial recognition. The first time we saw a pigweed, the machine didn't know what kind of plant it was, but we taught it by giving it tens of thousands of examples of that pigweed, and now it's an expert in pigweed. We save up to 90% of the amount of herbicide that you would spray if you were spraying the entire field.
The weeds have become a little bit more of a pest than what they were originally. They've become resistant to a lot of the herbicide that we've been using on them.
With the rig, we have other options open to us. We can spray different chemicals that we're not able to spray before. We can take one man and put him on a tractor, and we can do the work of 8 to 10 people.
We're seeing no end to the use of this technology. Essentially, anything that may be cost prohibitive or more difficult to do when you're spraying on a broadcast basis, but much more grower beneficial if we're spraying on a very precise basis.